Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're watching this. It's been one hell of a busy weekend. So to get some help, I'm joined with Oli, who we're going to talk about sort of the situation regarding today's announcement that we are in the hunt for a director of football.
We're big time now.
As it stands right now, we've had to push this back throughout the day, waiting for the announcement, but it's here so we can talk about it. Firstly, Oli, are you still in mourning over the loss of Darrell Clarke? Because I know he had a special place in your heart.
I know I had a bit more faith in him than some others, but no, I think the total sort of meh attitude from the fan base sort of summed up his time with us. You know, I think I tweeted out just before the announcement, it makes sense for me to have a bit of like consistency, and if he'd stayed, then maybe 3-4 years time we could look back at what a great fantastic job he'd done, but it wasn't going that way. It was trending pretty poorly, and when you look at what he's done or not been able to do at Vale, you know what, maybe the Darrell outlot were probably right, to be fair. So we're not in much better place, but there you go.
I mean, you're right, there was a downward trend with him, but it's good that we've turned it around and we're now shooting up the league. I mean, we make the joke and make light of it, but I don't think there's as much else you can do at the moment. Things are looking grim, but maybe some promise with the director of football search. How do you feel with Dutton remaining in charge, although it was a very clear message that he has to turn it round? Do you feel it's the right decision from the board and from Leigh Pomlett, or would you have gone in a different direction?
It's an interesting one. I wasn't expecting the announcement to be that we were going after a director of football. I think in terms of Dutton, I think Leigh had already said a few times that he really liked Dutton and he was his guy, and I think he sort of tied his hands to him. He wants him to do well. He's obviously committed to him in a time where we have had so much change and it is becoming a bit of a mess of a season. You've got to balance that consistency of, we need someone who knows the players and knows the club a little bit more with, do we bring someone new in, hope we get this new manager bump, they come in, they try some new ideas. So I'm not surprised that he was sticking with Dutton. I'd never thought that he was going to come out and, say that we're sacking our manager. He seems like the type of character who wants some more of that consistency. So yeah, not too surprised that it was a sort of vote of confidence, if you like. Interesting director of football thing was really interesting. I wasn't expecting that at all. I think it shows some level of sort of long-term thinking. We need someone at the club, I think, who is going to provide some longevity. So we were chatting a little bit just before we started recording. Director of football to me doesn't make sense if they're going to be here for 12 months, 18 months, and we sack them when things start going poorly, the way that we do with managers or have done over the last 3 or 4 years. For me, that role needs to be a bit of a ever present. So that makes sense to me. But, if things don't trend upwards over the next couple of years, people are going to be looking at a director of football, wondering what we're spending budget on, wondering what they're doing, wondering how we managed to cope before without one. So an interesting announcement, but yeah, we just got to wait and see now and see what that looks like. I can't see anything happening before the end of this season. So I think 2022 or next season will be the season that we can start judging someone and evaluating what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's not going to immediately change things. However, director of football that will be looking over transfers and helping with that side of things and squad building, it gives them chance to evaluate the squad and to sit down with Dutton and go, right, what is the system you want to nail in? How do you want them to play? Let's go out and recruit for that. And I think that's something that sounds perfect if it can be pulled off. I think one of the biggest criticisms for Clarke's reign in charge was that the recruitment felt quite pointless at times. I mean, it took him 3 windows to get a right midfielder in.
Yeah.
Or 4 windows. Yeah, it was the 4th one. And you kind of think, why didn't we have one? Whereas I feel that a director of football can focus on that and go, right, I need to find someone to fit this slot. We want someone that is maybe younger, more energy, more pace, or maybe more experienced, they will have those conversations rather than it being on the manager. I like Dutton. I don't want him to fail. I think he's a really nice bloke. He's very young. I think you forget he's 35.
Yeah.
And a lot's been made about how much of a good coach he is, which I don't think it's a surprise actually that a director of football is coming in. It seems that he's maybe not experienced enough behind the scenes and doing everything off the training field. So it's going to be a big appointment. I don't really know who I would like as a director of football. I don't know who's done it or who could do that role. I think it's quite a new territory for the club. But I think that we've got questions that we'll come on to later about the squad and recruitment and who we'd keep and all of that.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of changeover over the summer. Do you feel that a director of football is the better person to come in and handle that so that Dutton can focus on the squad and matches?
Yeah, possibly, particularly with, we've touched on there, Dutton's sort of lack of experience at this level. And, you know, a director of football, you mentioned this before we were talking about, you know, having that contact book and understanding who we can reach out to, who we can speak to, you know, the local clubs. I saw a lot of tweets about the local clubs that surround us. I mean, we've had a few more loanees come in more recently from these clubs, but we never seem to tap up the better talent from, you know, Villa, Albion, Wolves, Blues even. You know, we got some of these lads went and played Liverpool and, you know, gave them a good hiding. Oh, well, they got battered, sorry. Liverpool gave them a good hiding, but they put a good shift in themselves. And, you know, someone who's maybe got that sort of level of gravitas about them, who can speak to those clubs, other clubs around the league, find out what we need, and like you said, identify and recruit them, because I don't know if Dutton has got that in him. I think the club generally, I think Wolves was a pretty well regarded club as, you know, somewhere to send players, but I never feel like we get that much from any transfer. We seem to sign players who are, you know, pretty much the same as ones we've had in the past, who aren't particularly big upgrades. We get the odd one or two when it comes together. I don't want to talk about the Dean Smith era because everyone talks about it all the time, but that one season where it all came together was great. But otherwise, you know, the standard of football in League 1 and 2 is so similar. I think for me, the players that we need are the consistent ones, because I see people bashing our squad all the time, but we've seen them play good football, and you just wonder, why don't they do this week in, week out? They tend to do the rubbish stuff week in, week out. So we need the players who can perform 7 out of 10 every single week. That gets you out of these lower leagues, in my opinion. And if we can find someone who's got a bit more of that, you know, gravitas about them to go and find them players, then maybe it's the best thing to do. And Dutton, if he is as good a coach as the club say and as the players seem to say behind the scenes, maybe that is the recipe for success, which we haven't had for a long time. So yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. I've got to be honest, I don't know too much about what directors of football do, particularly at this level. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the club lay that out, and if maybe at a fan forum we get more info on how that's going to work. But I think that's a good suggestion you've made, you know, let the coach coach, and maybe the director of football can take on some of that sort of football club admin that, you know, managers probably, some of them love and some of them just want to, you know, coach the team and get them on the pitch on the weekend.
I think you spot on with that. Like, I don't feel that I don't think Leigh Pomlett would allow a director of football to just, you know, go out and sign a load of players without having that consultation with Dutton. And Dutton's going to have his own ideas, and he's going to want players as well that he will go, I'd like to know about the availability, all of that. But I think the biggest thing is, at the moment, Dutton looks like he's trying to settle the side, but whilst having to do everything else. And I think if you take a lot of that pressure off of him, things like contracts, things like that sort of thing, transfers coming in as well, going out, or transfer offers coming in, he can be in the know, but have it there with someone else working on it, while, like you said, he can get the 11 players that he wants to start getting sorted, getting some tactics laid down. Talking of tactics and that sort of stuff, we've seen a lot of formations from him, a lot of really curveball ideas where we've got wing backs, but wingers who tuck in. And a lot of crazy ideas. Do you think that that's been his aim, to try a lot of systems out, or do you genuinely think that he believes that maybe a 3-4-1-2 is the right way?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one because we've been in this position with Clark where you put an 11 out and you expect them to get a result, or they're the 11 best players and they come away and they underperform week in, week out. And then we have a manager who comes in and tries to try something different, and everyone's up in arms about the fact that we've changed this system and we're playing this player in different places, that it doesn't seem to make sense from the outside when you get that Twitter announcement at 2 o'clock and you see 6 defenders and whatever else. You think, what's going on here? But
I mean, it has been a thing of, I mean, I try and tweet as close to 2 o'clock as possible when the squad's out, but there's been weeks where it's been like 5 past, 10 past while I'm like, right, he could be there, he could be there.
Yeah.
Like it is a bit curveball at the moment.
Yeah. So I try to always, wait till kick off, watch the game, see how it plays out before judging it, because you never know what they're going for. But I think, unfortunately, the way that these players have been so inconsistent all year, I think he's almost been forced to try something else, because what we had been doing, or what you might consider a more typical 4-4-1-1 or a 4-2-3-1, or whatever way we've shaped up over the rest of the season, we just never found the winning formula at all. And he's so, as you would be, so desperate for a win. I think he's just trying to do something different, because almost why the hell not, which sounds a bit ridiculous when you say it out loud, but the players haven't done it in any other formation, so why not mix it up? And and we're just in such a rut of poor performances and poor results for 20 games. I know our form for the last 10 is one of the worst in the league, but I bet if you expanded that out to the last 20, would be somewhere near the bottom. I
know last 5 there are 2 teams that have only picked up 1 point, and it is us and Port Vale.
Yeah, there you go.
Which I think we're both low on the last 5, and I haven't seen the last 10, but I would assume it is the same. Obviously, Leigh Pomlett isn't happy with the form, and in the video, he was very honest that he's not happy. So I don't really want to linger too long on the squad and individual players, because we all know that the whole team is underperforming. There's been a couple of standout. I think Kinsella can come out of the season and hold himself well. Same with Norman, and I think Perry has done himself well coming in. There's going to be a big summer rebuild. Are you concerned with that? Or do you feel that actually we've seen glimpses from the side, but it's not consistent enough? Why not release a lot of them and hit that reset button again?
Yeah, I think we're at reset phase. I thought we were at reset phase when Clark came in, and was hopeful that he would build a squad that would maybe hang around for 2 or 3 years. I think where you look at where we're probably going to finish, which is probably just outside the relegation zone, these players aren't going to want to hang around. Some of them will fail upwards. It happens all the time. It happened when we were in League One. Players go to bigger clubs after not particularly performing too well. I think a lot of players will get better offers financially from teams worse than us. I think some of them will get better offers from teams better than us. And with that squad, outside of some of the lads that we've stuck by and developed, Kinsella, Bates, I think, signed a new contract anyway midway through the season. Perry's one that we all want to keep an eye on. There's not too many of them who, owe us anything, in my opinion. So I wouldn't be surprised if we lose a lot. There's some that I would like to stay from, ones that are obviously in contract anyway that would have to be sold, which, maybe, depending where we're at financially, we would lose them. Others who are in on loan, who, if we could get them back again, I think would be great. I think Wright and Melbourne have been pretty decent for us. But again, they'll probably get better offers to go elsewhere. So I think it has to be a rebuild, just based on where we're going to finish. No one's going to look at that squad at the end of the season and say, that's the squad that's going to get us up this year if we've just finished, 21st in League Two. So it's almost a necessity, I think. And like the last few years, high turnover. I wouldn't be surprised if, almost half the squad is elsewhere when we come to next season.
it doesn't concern me as much. I mean, there's players that if they stay, great, but if they go, probably it's going to work out for the best. I mean, the big one for me is if you rewound 12 months ago and said that Josh Gordon could be on his way out, alarm bells would be ringing. But there's not been a lot this season to suggest that we have to do our utmost to keep him.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few players like that. But we will see when that list comes out post-season. And there's still time for them to prove themselves. There's still, Pomlett's
win every game and we're finishing in the playoffs, mate. So
yeah, exactly. So, optimistic. Go back to Pomlett's video. There was a lot of chat about budgets and finances. And there's a question here that we've got that I cannot remember who it's from, so I apologise. But that he spoke about not borrowing a lot of money because if you borrow it, you have to pay it back. The question that came in and something that I want to discuss is, yes, we might finish low this season, but by financially staying relatively debt-free in terms of loans, will that put us in a good stead within the next couple of seasons? For me, I think it will. It might be a painful process for a season or two, but do you feel that the business side of it, Leigh Pomlett really can't be criticised for?
Yeah, I think, we've had to do what we've had to do to survive. I think the problem that I always have with the financial side of things is less an issue with Walsall, but more an issue with, the league structure itself. You see, they started to enforce, fair play, financial fair play and making sure people spend within their means a lot more quite recently. But for a long time, people would just come in, get to a load of debt, get promoted, take on some new backers and sort of get away with it, in my opinion. I don't think you can criticise the way Walsall Football Club has been ran for a long time. Obviously, the lease on the ground holds us back a bit, but even before Pomlett, the business side of Walsall Football Club has always been, relatively successful, and it has to prop us up to, carry on having a football team, which was a big bugbear for the fans because, are we a corporate hospitality and events company or are we a football club? And you'd like to think that we are a football club. Over the past few years, it's felt maybe the other way. But yeah, he's played it very shrewd. If we're not in any debt and we don't have anything to pay back and we're relatively, have some cash to maybe spend next year and we can actually have a good go at it long term, that's all you can hope for. I'd rather have Walsall in League Two than not have Walsall or have us starting again in, whatever division because we've overspent, lost all our money, everyone's jogged on and left us in a gaping hole. So he's done what he's had to do this year. I don't think anyone could have expected anything more. Adebayo leaving for the transfer fee, it's harmed us more than I expected. I didn't think we would drop so rapidly with him going, but everyone at the time said we understand it. I still understand it now. It's painful seeing him score goals for Luton and winners, and we can't bloody bag a chance to save our lives. But yeah, I think it's he's done well to keep us where we're at financially and hopefully, and a lot of things with the fans to, keep us happy. With loads of people kept their money in the club. We've got the third shirt coming out, which I think will be very popular. We redid the retro shirts, and everyone understands it's to get more money from us, but I feel like we're getting something from it, even if it's not results, which would be the most ideal thing. But, it is what it is, unfortunately. And on that side of things, I think it would be harsh to criticise him or the rest of the club more generally.
Yeah. And then finally, sort of before we kind of go on to some questions, there was a plea at the end of the video about backing Dutton, backing the team and really kind of trying to limit the anger and frustration on social media, which is quite a big topic at Walsall, especially in the fan base where there's been a lot of fingers pointed at individuals and about either backing the team too much, criticising it too much. What did you make of that? Because I think it's the first time that he's really sat down and gone, please back the team. What's your thought on that sort of final 3 or 4 minutes?
My first thought was boy, is he lucky we're not in the stadium, because there's a significant, I'd say probably a significant minority that are fuming and always the most vocal. Maybe 20 to 30% of the fan base are, pretty angry with where we're at and are a lot more critical than others, but they tend to be the loudest on socials and in the stadiums. I've been in some home ends and away ends where it's been, the vitriol towards the team has been immense. I'm generally accused of being a happy clapper, maybe too much, and being a little bit too much on the, let's be nice side of things, purely because, we've heard interviews with, I think it was Massey did an interview with an ex-Walsall player saying how, it does affect them. We, why do we go and chant before a game, and why do we encourage them when we get a corner and do whatever? Because we think as a fan base and as a group collective, we can impact, what they're doing and get people excited for a game. And I think that when you get too much abuse and too much criticism, it can negatively affect people, but it is their job. We pay their wages. They're here to serve us with results and wins and get us to where we need to be. So there's got to be a level of criticism, and I think it's just understanding in the social media age more generally, where is the line, when have we crossed it? Yeah. And it's almost outside of the football in general to me. It's just why are we abusing young mid 20-year-old lads because they've. And I'm not immune to criticising people. I've done it in the past, but I do think sometimes it can get a bit OTT when it doesn't need to be. But, you're a football club owner, you're a football team, you're open to criticism. Fans pay the wages, they're there to criticise. So I understand why he's probably said it, and it'll have no impact. It'll have absolutely no impact at all, I don't think. The same level of criticism, I think, will be there, and sometimes it's justified and sometimes it's not. And everyone's got an opinion, and that's why football's so good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I can understand it, especially when fans, like you said before, have backed the club. They've kept their money in. They have bought retro shirts. They have signed up to the Sadler's Lottery. They've backed the various schemes. That, and this is where we're going to move on to, is that we've been told all season that we're pushing for playoffs, yet relegation looks threatening. We're struggling to get a win from anywhere, and we've got Southend and Grimsby coming up. And you think if we lose one of those games and allow one of those teams to get 3 points on us, that's huge.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, one of the best names on Twitter, Colonel Nifty, has asked, is it worrying that the chairman thinks the squad should be challenging for playoffs? It's up there as the worst in the past 30 years. We're both quite optimistic people. I didn't see the game against Barrow. I did watch the highlights. Yeah, I know. I kind of feel that people, instead of being angry, were actually quite thankful that that another Walsall fan didn't have to watch it. But it is concerning because you want a realistic chairman, but also you want an optimistic one. And I think today's the first time he's really come out and said no, playoffs obviously isn't going to happen. Yeah. But in terms of the squad, there's not many reasons to be optimistic. And I for me, we are a mid-table team. But I do think that there was also enough in there at the start of the season to think that playoffs were realistic. I mean, what's your view on where we should be in the league?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the league table doesn't lie. We are where we are. There's no. I'd hate to say that we haven't had any bad luck, because we've had some bad luck and we've conceded late goals and we've dominated games that we've lost. But that's every team you speak to will say that. So the table doesn't lie. We deserve to be where we are. But at the same time, I think for me, the biggest thing is not necessarily the actual individual players themselves. It's the consistency within that group. I think when I look at when we were in League One for 15 years or however long it was, and now in League Two, you see it every week, and the fan base says the same thing. 1 minute the opponents we're playing are absolutely crap and look absolutely dross. 10 minutes later, they're on the ball, they look amazing, they're the best team we've played all season. And we go through those spells as well. And for me, it's about, have you got the consistency within your squad to turn those draws into wins? We've barely lost, we've hardly lost any games all season in the league, which is crazy when you think about it. It's just we haven't been able to stick the ball in the back of the net. So we're obviously not a top 10 team because we're not in the top 10. But I do think those players, if you could get the manager right and the environment right to coach the consistency into them and develop them into a playing squad, worst squad in 30 years. Yeah, when you look at the table, you'd have to say yes. But some of the players we've got, I've seen them play really well, and it's so frustrating that they don't click.
Yeah.
Like you said, Gordon last season, I'd be gutted if he went. I tweeted the other day against, it wasn't the Barrow game, it was the game before. Every touch of the ball was a miscontrol or a miskick.
Yeah.
We've had games where I can see players running in. We're in on goal if we can just play a 15-yard pass along the ground, and it gets booted out for a throw in, and you just think, what is this madness? So
yeah,
table
there was a pretty
could have been
damning.
better.
I don't know if you saw. There was a pretty damning league table that it was before the recent set of fixtures for all of League Two, where based on balance of play and expected goals scored, expected against, there was a lot of whatever the algorithm was, there was a lot taken into account. The expected league table also would be 8th. And I think that's, like you said, the table doesn't lie. For me, the players haven't given themselves much to be proud of. The fact that by chances that we've created and chances that we've conceded in terms of sort of the general balance of play, it's not even like we're a couple of places below. We are, we're half the league table below where we should be.
Yeah.
According to stats, but stats can only get you so far. With that in mind, going on to Andrew Whitehouse, who's asked, what impact does this season's poor outcome have on our ability to retain our better players for next season? What can the club do now to persuade these players to stay? I think the director of football, that's going to be job number one, getting the core of the team that are the better players to stay before really doing anything else. How do you rate the chances of keeping the likes of Norman, the likes of Jack Nolan, who I think's out at the end of the season? I mean, we haven't really given him much to want to stay around and play football well.
Yeah. And when he has played, he's been good, I thought.
Yeah.
I think he's won. I've put his name down on a sheet of paper here just in case we did speak about him, because when I've seen him play, he looks like a talent. He looks pretty interested. He's pretty busy.
He's had the passing range of Holden as well. Like some of the passes he's played, he's ahead of the teammates.
Yeah. Has he even played 5 games? I don't even know if he's.
I without looking, I don't know, but he's looked a very bright.
Yeah.
But
So I think there's a couple of things. I think one thing that might play into our favour for once is that everyone's in financial mess. So I don't think there's going to be too much cash to be thrown around in the lower leagues next season. Salford and the likes probably will have, and the teams that are down here with generally bigger attendances that will get fans back might feel a little bit more flush with their cash. But no one's had as much income as they have previously. So hopefully we won't lose too many on the bidding front, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did. I think another key one is if Pomlett does stick with Dutton, regardless of us fans, what we think and what criticisms of the performances are, do they want to play for him? Do they like him? Is he as good a coach behind the scenes as people are suggesting? Because, if they want to play for him and they've enjoyed this, final quarter of a season it would be with him, maybe he's an attractive person to play with. But then conversely, with his lack of experience, it probably only takes, 1 or 2 other managers with a bit more experience to maybe poach some of them. So definitely finishing low down, I think, will be difficult for us. But also, unless you get promoted in League One and League Two, I don't think the players care too much anyway. We could finish 8th and see 50% turnover in the squad. We could finish 22nd and see 50% turnover in the squad. So
I think the difficulty is going to be that a lot of the players that were brought in or that have signed extensions under Clark have come to the club with the understanding that he was building a project to get back to League One. as we stand today, this is obviously before the Crawley game. We are the furthest point from that return to League One than we have been under Clark or Dutton. That's going to be difficult because players will want to be part of a project. Obviously, they will. And we are a project. But it's whether they feel that it's a project that actually is going somewhere soon, which is my concern. It's not a question that's come in, but I'd be interested to know who your top 3 players to keep hold of would be.
Yeah. Without knowing who's out of contract, Norman, I'd definitely try and keep hold of.
I think we know he is, because when he signed, it was under Keats and it was a 2.5-year deal, which saw him have half a year in League One getting relegated, and then it's been the 2 seasons in League Two. So I'm sure his is up this season.
Yeah, so I think he's been a standout player. Holden, I think, is in contract but was injured, even if he's not. So I think we might be able to keep hold of him if he's coming back.
And I think under Pomlett as well, we've had a few players that have stayed for 1 year that have got extensions. So I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah, I think the rest of them who are knocking about more generally, Wes has been all right this season, but he's been very frustrating. But we've seen that he can win games, so I'd maybe want to keep hold of Wes. But then from the actual squad of players who are ours, there's not too much in there. I think the back four, for all their criticism for not keeping a clean sheet for so long, midway through the season and even now, have done all right-ish recently, and it's always good to have a bit of consistency there. But they've made a lot of individual errors, so none of them are indispensable, I don't think, or except Norman. I would like Norman to stay.
That's the difficult thing. We're struggling to get a top 3, but for the complete wrong reason.
Yeah.
Like, I'd want to be in this situation going, oh, but they've been on fire. They've been awesome. Like, how would you balance it? But it's not. It's, oh, this player's shown glimpses, or last season they were good.
I've got one again for a boring reason, but I would keep hold of Jack Rose because we've only got 2 keepers. And I think Roberts, I don't even know if he's out of contract. I think he's had his time with us. I think he needs a fresh start somewhere else. But we would literally have a completely new goalkeeper crop then, which, it's not the most annoying thing to get a load of new goalkeepers, but it'd be good to have a bit of consistency there. So
now I'm going to come out with a potentially bold statement here.
Go on.
I feel that Roberts is a must keep.
Oh.
For me, under Brian Dutton, he has looked a much better goalkeeper. And whether that is something that was going on with Clark, whether something's been changed with the style of play, I think in the games that we've had Dutton in charge, Roberts has looked not back to his best, but you look at, the Stevenage game for sure, he pulled off some great saves, some really good saves. And I think keeping him in for the rest of the season, obviously we'll be able to know more as it goes on. But I think he looks a much better keeper under Dutton, and I think he would be maybe in my top 3 to keep. And that is a big statement to make.
Yeah, I'm not going to back you on that one. I think the biggest thing for him with me, particularly when fans come back, is he's only one mistake away from 6,000 tweets at him and calling him a dickhead and everything. So,
and don't get me wrong, I know that he made some awful mistakes earlier in the season, but he knows it, and he's been very open that he knows it and that he has worked through that. So, but please don't criticize me too much when you when you read this. Right, let's have a look through some more questions. One that I didn't want to talk about before because I'd seen this question come through, but David Birch has asked, when Pomlett said about it's going to take longer to return to League One, does that mean he is looking to play non-league football and hoping we return to League Two at the first time?
In my opinion, no, I don't. I think relegation would be pretty much a disaster for a number of reasons. I think my interpretation of the timeline that he said has been pushed out a little bit was definitely more focused around the freehold, or hopefully was, just in the sense of, can we get the funds to, get that off Bonza. And then for me, just more generally, I think, he's looked at, I don't remember him ever setting a deadline anyway. It was just as soon as possible. But I think for the fans, as soon as possible was this year. Like that was it. It was right, we need to go up this year, which obviously hasn't. So he's given himself, I think he said 1, maybe 2 years as like a timeline. I think for me, that's just him being realistic. He can point back to that interview and say, look, in 6 months' time or midway through next season, if we're not where we're going to go, he can say, look, I said ages ago, this is a 1-2 year project. And I think he's realised that, when we put the team together at the start of the year, you never know. That's the thing. You just never know what's going to manifest. And I think for me, you never know, or at least for me, someone I don't follow any of the players in League Two. You look at a squad that's come in, or you look at the players that we have at the start of the season, and it takes 5, 6, 7 games to really understand, right, are they any decent? What are they like? And I honestly think they probably genuinely did think, or Pomlett and Clark probably looked at that squad and said, yeah, we can get into playoffs at least with this squad.
I think we were all happy with the core of the team that we kept, and the players that were released. I don't think there were many. I don't think there was much frustration. I think maybe Shea Facey, but you could understand with his fitness. But the rest, I thought it was a really good clearing out of players that we weren't going to make it. And I pre-season, I thought Rose coming back, Holden coming back. I was really excited by Osadibe and White, because I felt that Osadibe needed a home and maybe could do what Adebayo had done. And White, before his injury at Mansfield, he was like up there for player of the season a couple of years back. But it just, I don't know, I felt that we'd kept the core together, ended last season well, started fairly brightly, but like you said, players can just go off the boil. And there was obviously Clark wasn't happy, which must go bleed into the team. There's no two ways about it. But I think Pomlett has said that he wants to get the club into League One, pushing for the championship, and that will be his kind of, I'm going to end here, which is a very business-like approach.
That's when he runs out of money. He can't fund a championship season. So
basically. But for me, I think, like you said, he's been quite smart by going, we need to do a rebuild again. Give us a couple of years so that if things are next season, he can go back to it.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned the B word in Bonza. It was something that I've been quite frustrated with recently, and the fans have been. For me, there was never any doubt in my mind that Bonza was calling any of the shots, and Pomlett has cleared that up today. Were you glad to hear that and to him actually address that concern?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I honestly hadn't given it too much thought, because my understanding of what happened when Pomlett came in was that Jeff would be basically behind the scenes, landlord, but not behind the scenes in any way. And I think even his brother's shares or whatever were sold and bought as well. So I wasn't worried about it too much. I can see why the fans would have been, because it feels very much like a Bonza. Whenever things go bad, it feels like we want to blame Bonza, and Bonza's not here anymore. So so he was very firm on it, and you can see, I remember the fan forum when he came in, and even the one before, the famous line, I don't know if you call it a famous line, where he said something like, I'm not your savior, like Pomlett said that. And then 12 months later he's buying the club. But he's a very firm character, and you can tell he doesn't like having his, I don't want to say his ego bashed necessarily. He was very firm on it. He was very firm on, look, this is my football club. I own 67 point whatever % of the club. All these are the guys are small fry, basically. He was very firm on it. So no, I wasn't concerned about it before, and I'm not too worried about it now, other than the fact that we obviously need to get the club reunited with the freehold, and I think that'll be a big step and a big win for Pomlett. Even if he doesn't get us to the championship, he's the man who can do that. And save us 400 grand a year in rent or whatever the hell it is. Then that'll be a legacy in its own.
I've just had a look through the questions. I think we've pretty much addressed all of them in general chat. What I would like to end on is we've got, oh God, what is it, like 11, 12 games left this season. What would you like to see in terms of tactics, personnel, any kind of thing that, right, Oli Swift is Walsall manager tomorrow. What would you do in terms of your starting 11?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the, and I'm not the only one to have noticed it, and I think some people mentioned it even in the questions, is let's just stick the best players in their best positions and let's just, see what happens. I think for me, the back four, I tweeted the other week that, I don't want people to think that I'm saying Hayden White is amazing. He has played better the last 10 games, I think, than he had the previous 10. But I still think if you need a right-sided defender, whether it's a 5 or a 4, even as a 3, I think Cameron Norman needs to start in that position. I think Scar and Sadler, for me, have looked pretty decent together. I know Scar got dropped for that one game after being a namesake, but I think any of that back 3, any of those 3 between Sadler, Clark and Scar as your central defenders makes sense. And then I think for left back, Melbourne at the minute, I know he's on loan, but has been, I think, probably the better performer. I think for me, the challenge then is the midfield, because Nolan, I've not seen enough of him, but I think every time I've seen him, it's been good.
But do you play him over right?
Exactly. Right, Loney, playing well. I think you've got Perry, Bates and Kinsella, who all offer something slightly different, but are pretty similar players. But then Frank Vincent, every time I've seen him, has reminded me a lot of Joe Edwards, and he's had that sort of, he wants to go forward with the ball. And that's what I sometimes get frustrated with our midfielders, is why aren't we going forward with it? So I think the midfield, you throw Osadibe into the mix there, who I don't think has been great generally, but
no.
Neither is anyone. I think that's the crux, is what is the midfield that creates chances for us. And I think the biggest playmaker in there is obviously Wes. I think Wright as sort of the wingers then would make sense. And then you have Bates and Perry maybe holding. And then you need 2 up top. But I know we've criticised the strikers generally a lot today. And I think that's the biggest thing for me then, is I don't trust Lavery or Gordon to put the ball in the back of the net then. So do you give it Osei, do you throw him up there and leave him up there? I think that's the biggest crux, like who's actually going to bag the chance when we get it.
For me, I agree. I'd agree 4-4-2, back to basics. Let everyone understands their role in a 4-4-2. Maybe the only kind of players that need to have a bit of a adapting is your central midfield in that, but your defend, your fullbacks get up and down when they can, your wingers are wingers, your strikers are strikers. It's a basic, but I also think it's the best that we looked last season.
Yeah.
And for 2 seasons, we've been saying we weren't scoring enough goals. 4-2-3-1 worked because we got Adebayo up top. We don't have Adebayo up top. So we need, for me, to go back and have Gordon and Lavery as your front 2. I haven't seen enough from I haven't seen anything to go, this guy, we need to be playing him. And Reed, I think it's unfair to ask a 19-year-old who's barely played any football to be responsible. Gordon and Lavery, they had a spell last season in 4-4-2 as who was going to score the most goals. And I think get them back to that, get it back to having Wes on the left, and I'd even say Holden on the right when he's back, but we've got Wright as well and Nolan. I think getting 4-4-2, get them back to basics, get the front 2 back to the system they were last season when they were both scoring more freely would be how I would go about it.
Yeah. There's a lot of, chopping and changing and trying to see what the opposition are doing, and it'd be good for us to maybe try and take the game to people ourselves. But yeah, I just any of them to put the performance in. That's the problem.
Yeah. I think we'll end on an optimistic note, and I think it was you who maybe tweeted it, but isn't there a bit of excitement that Kinsella, Bates and Perry are the central midfielders going forward?
Yeah, it was me. Yeah,
It was. Yes, I knew I'd seen it
think,
somewhere. I'd seen a couple of like people tweet it, but I was sure I saw that you had.
Yeah. I've been a huge fan of Bates since he arrived. I actually thought the start of this season, the first 10 games, was probably the worst I've seen him in a Walsall
Yeah.
shirt. He just came back, and I was just thinking he looks out of his depth all of a sudden, but he's grown into the season. Perry's come in and looked really solid, and two young lads both extended their contract. Or Kinsella and Bates definitely did extended their contracts. I think some of that, we've talked about how much chopping and changing we have to do season on season. If you could get those three, committed for the next 2-3 seasons, and build the team around them. They're not necessarily game changers. I think one of them is going to have to get a goal into their game, whether it's Perry or Bates. And I've seen Perry in a couple of situations where over the past few weeks where I've been like, hit it, go on, hit it. And you can tell maybe he's a little bit nervous to, maybe take the shot on rather than giving it to a teammate. Maybe he'll grow into that. I think that's what's missing with those three is, can someone pop up with 4 or 5 goals in a season for us? But yeah, excited by that prospect. I think 3 young, really good talents. I'm convinced Bates will be a player. He's a Cov fan, so you'll probably end up at Coventry in the Championship or something. But no, I think that is something to be optimistic about. And if we can get a few more of those talents and young lads coming through, which would be great, then yeah, who knows? Maybe we can finally get back to League One for 25 more years. Who knows?
Do you know what? We've ended this by saying the most promising thing is the fact we've got 3 really good centre mids, and yet we both go 4-4-2. Brilliant. Oli, thank you again for coming on. Been great to speak to you again. And yeah, let's see what's going to happen over the next 12 games.
Brilliant. Nice one, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.